You know what's true about this world? We like to celebrate flashy things. But what about courage? What about bravery? What about suffering? This is the place we give credit to what often goes unseen. This is the place we honor choosing grit.
Ready?
No. Hey, everybody. I'm Carrie, small town girl turned inner city social worker, and I'm so glad that you're here. As I've shared before, one of my hopes for this season is to honor some of my biggest supports over the years. In my first interview, I brought up my family, and this interview, I'm going to highlight a random crew of people that became a total gift to me while I finished undergrad. In my first mini-sode, I mentioned how at one point in my journey to finish school, I chose to let go of fighting for the college life I wanted and chose to move home and transfer to the school my mom worked at, where I had a little more freedom to slowly chip away at my degree. When I made this decision to transfer to this pretty small school in a pretty small town, and also considering all that was going on with me at the time, I pretty much completely laid to rest all hopes of maintaining any form of a social life. Outside of a couple established relationships, I told myself I'd have friends again after I graduate. However, in efforts to connect with some local humans, a couple months after I moved, I started to go to a young adult gathering through a local parish. And it turns out a lot of other young adults in the area were looking for the same thing, because over time, that gathering grew from about 5 people to sometimes almost 30. We called ourselves the Breakfast Club, which I don't think any of us to this day can explain why. But the unexpected joy of these friendships brought a lot of healing to my heart when I really needed it. This brings me to my guest today, Matt Endres and his fiancé, Katie Boehm. Matt and Katie are two of the lovely humans I got to know during this time after I transferred, and I'm so happy to share Matt's story with you all of how he learned to choose grit while being born looking slightly physically different than many of us. I think you'll also love hearing Katie's perspective of it as well. Enjoy! Oh, and quick disclaimer, this is not a couples podcast, even though this is the second interview in a row I'm interviewing a couple. I just really like including the perspective of a significant other when possible. And also, I apologize for a few technical difficulties that led us to have to do a random speakerphone recording in the first 10 minutes. Okay, thanks. Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Sure thing.
Happy to be here.
We are currently sitting on the living room floor of future home of Matt and Katie. And tell me, guys, in order to get to know you both a little bit better, Matt, we'll start with you. Current guilty pleasure.
90s boy bands. I can't help but sing along when some of those songs come on.
Like all of them? Or
the ones I know.
Bands?
So the singles, so Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, most likely. But yeah, those are probably the guilty ones. Otherwise, I just love 90s music.
Katie,
Guilty
do you have a
pleasure?
Ozzy McGuire.
Yeah, actually. Matt got me Disney Plus for Christmas. He bought it the morning of Christmas Eve.
Yes.
And literally I opened a card that said, Merry Christmas, something, blah, not blah, blah, blah. Because it was
She doesn't remember what I wrote.
It was a very nice card. I have it somewhere. So that has been my guilty pleasure. I have binge watched both the first and second season of the Lizzie McGuire Show in anticipation for the upcoming revival, which as of 2 days ago just kind of said that it's on hiatus. So I'm actually very upset about that. And also eating leftover Christmas cookies because we have a lot left still.
So Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot now. The definition of grit is courage, resolve, and strength of character. Tell me about an aspect of your life that has taught you that.
So when I was born with 2 fingers on each hand, and my left elbow does not bend. So a lot of people would, categorize that as being born with a disability. And the interesting thing about that was, while my parents were pregnant, they didn't have the ultrasounds to let them know that when I was born, I was going to have this condition, I guess we'll call it. So after I was born, immediately after, the doctors were cleaning me up, and they told my parents, we need to talk. And he was very much upfront with them about the condition and didn't sugarcoat it, which I think was a benefit to them. But it definitely wasn't something that they planned for.
Right.
So instead, what they did is, they brought me to a doctor, and this doctor suggested that they break my left elbow so that it was bent permanently at a 90-degree angle. So my arm's at my side, my hand would be like on my stomach kind of thing.
Right.
And my parents kind of looked at each other and said, we don't know if that's the best decision. We should probably ask for a second opinion.
Okay.
So they got connected with a doctor who was associated with Shriners in Chicago, which I'll talk about a little bit more.
Okay.
And he basically told my parents the two fingers on his left hand, which are fused together, we think there's enough bone and muscle structure that if we separate them, we think he'll have movement of each individual finger as normal as can possibly be. As far as his left elbow, leave it as is. Breaking it probably will be a little more difficult for him. He'll never be able to reach out and grab anything. So leave it as is, and let's see how he does with that. So somewhere like earlier than a year, they separated the fingers on my left hand, which is how I've known them to be. So I do have the independent motion as he predicted. And the most interesting thing, going back to your definition of grit, is probably more of what I learned from my parents than anything that I experienced on my own, just because they were thrust into a situation where this was unexpected. They probably have never envisioned that, they would have a child with this sort of condition, and they were just kind of thrown into the deep end and told to swim. Luckily for me, they had good head on their shoulders, and they were able to ask people all the right questions. How do we do this? What's the best way to treat him and everything? And I believe it was the same doctor that performed the surgery, or at least recommended the surgery, told them basically treat him normal. So they, from a young age, they didn't treat me any different. Obviously, there's some things like monkey bars or push-ups that I can't do, and they never tried to force me to do that. But for the most part, they never let me get away with it as an excuse. I remember as a kid, I made a mess in my room, and I came downstairs. My mom asked me, basically, has that room, have you picked up your toys from your room? And I told her, no, I only have two fingers. I can't do that. And she basically told me, those two little fingers made that mess. Those two little fingers can pick it up. So they didn't cut me slack where I didn't need to be cut slack. And to kind of counter that, so I talked about Shriners. Shriners is a nationwide system of hospitals, one of which is located in Chicago. And they are for children with disabilities or amputation. And the medical coverage for that condition is covered from the time they're born till the time they turn 18. So I went there for, my yearly checkups, probably until maybe middle school, until I started being able to do a lot of the daily things. And we realized, okay, this isn't impacting him as regularly as we thought. And from then on, I'd go, I don't remember if it was every other year, every third year, or just whenever I felt like I needed it. And the last time I visited there was the year before I turned 18, and the checkups would be free. That way they could do one final checkup and say, yep, this is covered, you're fine, just before I reached adulthood.
Do you remember anything, was there anything specific that they had to help you with at Shriners, or anything that was particularly challenging growing up in childhood that you had to work harder to learn?
I don't remember specifically if there's anything Shriners did for me, whether it was tying shoes or writing with a pencil. My parents would show how they do it, and then I try to mimic it, but adjust it to what would work for me. I know when I was trying to learn how to tie my shoes, I asked my parents, okay, how do I tie my shoes? And they told me basically, well, we'll show you how we do it, and we'll give you the steps how we do it, but you'll have to kind of figure out how to do those steps on your own. And I ended up being the first person in my kindergarten or preschool class to learn how to tie my shoes.
That's great. You were actually ahead of the game because of it.
Yeah, in that regard, I was for some things. So it's just interesting to think about and kind of curious, would that have been the case if I did not have my arms the way that they are?
Props to your parents.
Oh, I agree.
At the Shriners summer picnic, all the kids would come and they'd have a bunch of, petting zoos or whatnot, just a way for kids with the disabilities to see people like them. I think the goal of it was to let us know that, no, you're not alone. There are other people struggling with similar things. But there was one kid that we kind of got to know, and I'd see pretty much every summer, would always walk around and would always keep his hands in his pockets because he was very self-conscious about it. And I don't know where that came from exactly, but I honestly think that a lot of the reason why I'm not terribly self-conscious about it is because my parents didn't let me get away with it and just treated it as, this is the way you are. Like, there's nothing like wrong with you. It's just different. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just how you are. So I think that is a lot of the reason why I kind of developed the attitude that I had or have.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Do you remember it all? Like, I'm just thinking like every single middle schooler and high schooler I know struggles with being self-conscious at one point or another. And so much of at least where I grew up, so much of your status can be put on how you look. So did you ever struggle in that way with a certain self-consciousness or?
Where the self-consciousness comes in is I do not like watching videos of myself. So I know everybody has the thing where they don't like hearing their own voice, or at least most people do. When I watch videos, it's a reminder to me of how I actually look to other people. Because in my day-to-day life, I see my hands maybe in the mirror or just out of the corner of my eye, and it's just the way it is. Through some of the running and everything, my parents are always like, oh yeah, we can spot you from a hypothetical mile away. Just because your gait is different, your arm is different, it makes you easy to see. At the time when I was doing it, I probably didn't notice, probably didn't care. But then when you watch the video, you're like, nope, I stick out like a sore thumb. So I don't like that because it is just a reminder of, oh, this is different. But shortly after, it's not something that I dwell on. I move on because, the other choice is you just kind of sit there and wallow in the self-pity, and that's just not going to be helpful or good.
It sounds like, based on knowing you and what you're saying about your family, it wasn't necessarily a taboo topic either. If your parents were at the point of joking about it, I wonder if that played into your comfortability with it as well.
That probably helped quite a bit. My dad might kill me for this, but that's okay. When I got into my teen years, jokingly every once in a while he'd put the L on his forehead and tease me, calling me a loser, just randomly. I don't remember what it was for, kind of thing. So I'd turn back and be like, oh, Dad, you're a loser. And I can't really make an L. It kind of looks more like a C. And he's like, what is that, a C? Does that stand for chump? So just little things like that. And it was not anything that I ever took personally or got mad about. It was just one of those okay, thanks, that's funny. And that's honestly translated into a lot of different situations in life. So I'm an engineer, and at work, a lot of times I work with people in the shop, and the language and attitudes can be kind of rough around the edges, we'll call it. So there was one day I was in the shop working with one of the guys that had probably the most raunchy senses of humor. And we were working on one of the conveyors, and I'm sitting there with a wrench trying to do something, and it slipped out of my hand and hit the ground. I was like, crap, I'm all thumbs today. And he just busted out laughing. He's like, dude, that is the funniest thing I have ever heard. And it's one of those that I kind of use it as a way to break the ice, because the
you
more
were intending to make a joke.
Yeah, I meant it as a joke to kind of make fun of myself for, boy, that wrench shouldn't have fallen out of my hands.
Okay.
And it just puts everyone more at ease, I think, because they don't feel like it's like the word you used before was taboo. Like, it's not a taboo topic. It's something that people can ask me about and I don't mind. If I don't know someone, it can be a little more sensitive, but like once I get to know people, I don't mind. Okay, now what were you laughing about?
I was laughing about your Christmas T-Rex.
One of my friends from college, her Christmas gift to me one year was a T-Rex trying to do push-ups, and it just says "the struggle is real." And I'm like, she's like, I saw that, I had to buy it for you. It was just perfect. It's like, this is great, and it's a T-shirt that like I love wearing. Like it just amuses me.
So when that kind of stuff comes up for you, there's no hurt or like offense taken.
Sometimes there is. So I remember in college, I was at one of the career fairs, and I went up to introduce myself to someone working, I don't remember the company, but whatever booth it was. And I went up and like I shook hands with the woman there, and she grabbed my hand and like yelped and jumped back a little bit because she wasn't expecting it. And it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, this was incredibly embarrassing, but like she turned red and immediately started apologizing. And I was just like, okay, I know she didn't mean it. I know she didn't intend it. So I was just like, all right, so what can you tell me about your company? Just kind of glossed it over. But then there was another time when I was at work, I just started a job, and I was kind of getting to know what the projects would be that I was working on. And I was talking with one of my coworkers, and he started asking me like more personal questions. And I was like, all right, whatever, I'll ask him. So he asked me, he was like, oh, so are you married? I was like, no, not married. He's like, are you dating anyone? I was like, no, I'm not dating anyone. He says, oh, do you think your hands have anything to do with that? And it was just one of those like, okay, I literally just met you. We are crossing like the comfort zone line right now. So there are times that, uncomfortable questions are posed, but it's few and far between. And it's, again, how you react to it. And if need be, I'll, say, all right, I'm uncomfortable now. Can we please move on to something else? But
is that how you responded?
I think that one, I just straight up answered his question and said, no, it's not something, I dwell on too much. Like, I hope it's not the reason. I gave him the honest answer of kind of what was in my head, but not like my emotional reaction that I had to it, that I kept to myself. Cause I know if like, I didn't want to shut down a conversation.
That's like, your attitude about it is really amazing. Like the fact that it sounds like it's come so naturally to you from childhood. And like you said, like, that says so much about, I think it says a lot about the level of trust you must have had between you and your parents. Like the fact that you could speak so openly about it, and that your dad could make fun of you for putting a C on your head. Like, and you could know, and you could also know that they're not intending to hurt you, and like, it's all coming from a loving space. Like, yeah, I can imagine having that from when you were born has just given you so much more ease with dealing it growing up, it sounds like.
Well, and it was one of those, I don't remember how or when it came up, but I mean, there was one day that I was probably thinking about life, or the question probably was posed like, if there's something you could change about your life, like what would it be? And I remember the first thing that like popped into my head was like, oh yeah, of course, if I could change one thing, I would have been born with, the 5 fingers on each hand kind of thing, and like 2 working elbows. But then like the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, that's actually probably influenced my personality more than any other thing in my life. And not just that, but just the reaction of family and friends around me have like helped give me that personality, give me that sense of like that self-deprecating humor. So I realized, no, I wouldn't even change that.
Yeah. Wow. And yeah, I would say that's something that people pick up on about you pretty quickly. And you're just like happy-go-lucky. Do you remember when you first met our young adult group, when you moved to Fond du Lac it was like a pancake breakfast?
Oh yeah.
Were you there, Katie?
Yes, she was.
Yep.
Yeah.
She doesn't remember it really. I do.
I remember snippets.
It was the like pork chop breakfast or something that they have in February.
Pork chops?
Was it pork chops?
All right.
We looked it up one day.
That was one of the few times in my life I've been overwhelmed, like meeting new people. Usually I love it, but it was just one of those, like, had it been a big group and you all just started introducing me at the time once, it would have been fine. But I met like you at a separate time, and like slowly throughout the afternoon, I was just like, how many more of them are there?
That's great. Yeah, well, because that was when we were at the beginning stages of, I think, like developing our group. And we were like, yes, another young adults, join us, please. I want to get to you, Katie. I just want to make sure, Matt, that we've covered everything. Did you ever struggle with like picking a career that you felt like would suit you, or was it always you've always been really smart, haven't you? Intellectually.
I don't know how to respond to that.
You like got good grades.
I got good grades in high school.
You got into UW. Yeah.
Like, I think I realized from a young age I would never be a professional athlete, and I also didn't have the desire to do that. But outside of like being an engineer, not really. The only struggle is kind of like when I told the story about dropping the wrench, is hands-on activities are a little more of a struggle. So I can do a lot of the designs and the calculations, but when it comes to put stuff together is when I rely more on other people to do it.
And you're able to do that at your work now?
Yeah, for the most part, through all my jobs, it's always been like, we'll work with the people that are putting it together, and sometimes we'll do things ourselves, but my hands have also taught me from a young age to like the power of asking for help, like realizing, look, this is something I can't do. You got to get over the fact that you might be uncomfortable with it. Just ask for the help. Yeah. And sometimes I get stubborn. I'm just like, no, I'm going to do this. Leave me alone. And then 10 minutes later, okay, I can't do it. Can you help me out?
Yep. I'm the same. So speaking of Katie, I'm just curious, Matt, because I know like, I think every human struggles with wondering if our quote unquote disabilities are faults. I know for me, like I've struggled with wondering how that's going to affect relationships. Have you ever struggled with wondering if this was going to affect you in that way?
It was a struggle because I tried the whole online dating thing. Like I probably tried too hard to try and find like people to date. And there was a lot of times that it just never felt like it was going to happen. So I know there were times where I'm trying to figure out like, what is wrong with me? Like, what is it about me that people don't like? One of my friends from college sent me I think it was a birthday card, and just kind of wrote about like how good of a friend I was and how much I meant to them. And I realized I wasn't in a good place when I read it and went, I don't feel any of that, and just kind of like threw the card away. So I know it did cross my mind, like, well, is it my hands? And then it was, well, if it is, I better get used to it because there's nothing that I can do about it. I can either, let this define who I am, or I can kind of like pull myself up and just kind of like push through, because the other option is you let it overwhelm you and you just kind of lay back and let the world pass you by. Even though I know I fell into the trap like a few times, and I just had to like rely on friends to help like pull me out of it. Like, what do you want to call it?
Despair?
Yeah, it's a good word for it. Yeah.
And did you had people to share that with? And
there were a couple times where I talked with a couple friends, and I remember at one point I realized I was struggling with a bunch of things, and I talked with one of my friends. I said, look, I'm struggling with this. I'm going to need help. I don't know what that looks like. And there weren't really too many other follow-up questions. It was just comfort in the fact of knowing that I had someone that I could go to and say, I need this help. That kind of helped break me out of the cycle of despair, if you will.
Yeah. I imagine, just going back to those relationships you had developed with friends, like, and people that know you and do love you as you are, like there's probably something therapeutic about that too. Just like remembering that you have those people. It's powerful that you were able to tell yourself this doesn't define me. So where were you at with that journey when you met Katie?
So I just moved to Fond du Lac for a job. I had just purchased a house. I had also realized when I lived in Kenosha, I was like, oh, I'm just going to be here temporarily. So I never really met anyone, so
Yeah.
Kenosha never felt like home. I was like, I'm not doing that when I moved to Fond du Lac. I want to meet people. So I was like, all right, what's a great way to meet people? Hey, young adult group. So I remember meeting all the young adults. I remember sitting next to Katie at the table, and I'm like, wow, she's really pretty. I can't wait till, I run into her again at the young adult function. And then I didn't see her for 2 years.
Yeah.
Because you were...
Yeah, at the time. So it was that was my last semester of college. And at that time, when Matt and I first met, I was actually seeing someone else. And so ironically, I actually didn't look through the lens of, oh, there's another guy within the young adult group. That wasn't the lens in which I met him. And I do remember shaking your hand for the first time and going, okay, well, I think this is going to be weird because I've never like shaken someone else's hand that looks different than mine. But Matt and I have talked since then. And he goes, no, it didn't, nothing. I don't recall anything strange about when you shook my hand. Your reaction wasn't different. Like you didn't nothing.
Yelp and jump
I didn't yelp and I didn't jump back. And I said, good, because I tried really hard not to do any of those things when I first shook your hand. So ironically, that's all I remember from us first meeting is, Matt seeming honestly very confident when he came and he met everybody and shook everybody's hands. And
I remember that as well.
Yeah.
Super confident.
And then a couple months later, I actually started my first job. And so I kind of pulled out of that life within the parish that I live by and kind of poured myself a little bit more into the parishes that I work with.
Well, I'm really glad he met you because it was great to get to know you those 2 years you weren't dating Katie.
Yeah.
Well, the funny part is I told her afterwards, I was like, I'm not actually sure she would have liked who I was at that time because I was still trying to figure out, I guess, my Catholic identity, if you will. And I was very unsure and unconfident about that part of my life. Go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
When we got to the point of Matt asking me out the first time, I wasn't even anticipating it as like a romantic ask. I said, okay. And then I said, who else is going? Oops, that wasn't it.
The answer was no one. It was supposed to be just the two of us.
I'm going to use that sometime.
And me being me, I had already said yes. So we ended up going,
and then I didn't see her for a full another year after that.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was a long...
Well, and afterwards, I actually told him, I said, I'm not in a place in which I'm looking to date. That's just not where I'm at right now. And I kind of explained to him the reasons why. And
it was a breath of fresh air.
The fact that she told you she wasn't
ready.
Yeah.
Well, that there was a reason behind it because I told her this, like, I think it was probably like right after. I was like, this has been par for the course for the last year of like me trying to date people, is that I think I told her, I was like, you're the fifth person this year that I've been told that who has told me that, no, I'm just not feeling it kind of thing. But I told her you actually had reasons and explanation for it. So it didn't feel like it was shooting me down hard. The funny part is after our first date and we didn't see each other for a while, I did start dating someone else. But I realized through that relationship that there were a lot of things I wanted out of a relationship that currently wasn't lining up with where that relationship was at. I had delved deeper into the Catholic faith and learned like a lot of these questions I've been asking, like they had answers for, and that all the answers made sense. So it was just like, wow, okay, so this is the direction that I'm heading. And I could tell that relationship wasn't going that way. And I remember like towards the end of the relationship when I was like, okay, do I have to break this off? Do I not? Remember one of the conversations I had with myself is like, okay, if you do break this off, you're going to be single again. It was funny because actually the first time that I like retouched base with her, I was like, hey, I want to have people over for a game night. Do you want to come? She's like, yeah, sure, definitely. So I reached out to like all our friends and invited everyone and no one else could come. So I remember I either called or texted her and I said, okay, it's just going to be the two of us. Are you okay with this? And I promise you, I invited other people. No one else can just come. So I understand if you don't want to.
So, okay, you guys started dating eventually. And Katie, at any point when you started dating Matt, was there any point you struggled with the concept of him, quote unquote, looking different?
It took some getting used to in the beginning when I first met him and game nights and things like that, but it was easier because we were in group settings and it would catch me off guard sometimes. But I think, when we first started dating, I still remember one of our first dates that wasn't actually a date. You took me out for my birthday.
Oh, okay.
For dinner.
Like, you're gonna have to narrow it down. There were a lot of those.
We had a lot of those. You took me out for my birthday for dinner, and I remember kind of paying attention a little bit more to how you ate, and it was because it was just me, and it was just me with him versus being in a group setting and trying to kind of wrap my head around is this something I'd be comfortable with for a lifetime, knowing I am the person paired with this person. And, that particular night, we actually stayed past closing time by like an hour. And I think that's really been the only time within eating or being out somewhere that's been something that I've noticed. But I asked once, pretty much I just asked, are you still able to hold me? Like, would you be able to hug me? As one of my concerns when there was a day that Matt kind of just flat out asked, is there anything that you're worried about? Are you thinking about? And of course, then he just came over and gave me a giant bear hug because that's just how we work. And, as things got more serious between us and we both were pretty sure of the idea and the concept and the direction that we were heading, I asked once or twice, mostly because I forgot the answer the first time because it had been a while, and just kind of asked about his hands and asked if it was hereditary or what happened. And he just reminded me, and he'd just say, no, this wasn't anything that was hereditary. Nobody did anything. And so just kind of, as with we both really want kids and we both would love to have a huge family. And that just needing to make sure that I got that question answered, because Matt's had some comments and concerns too, like, not changing a diaper before, not sure what that would look like, and probably going to have to jerry rig something together and figure out how to do that. But
holding a squirmy baby with one hand is gonna be messy.
But it wouldn't have affected my decision either way. And so those were some concerns. And when I first brought him home to visit and meet both sides of my family, we had some conversations because when he met extended family, I'm like, I don't actually know what their reactions are going to be. I know that I don't have any family members that would react negatively or harshly or anything like that. But it gave us an opportunity, because it's a 4-hour drive, to really talk about, hey, when you meet people for the first time, have you ever had people react this way? So that was my first time learning his story about the person that cringed away at that job fair, and things like that. And, obviously little cousins are going to react differently than grown adults and things like that, because their little cousins are really just going to actually try to figure out, how am I supposed to shake this hand? And it's all over their face as they're trying to figure it out. But for my immediate family, when I first brought him home, I think maybe, I don't actually remember if I did tell them anything before I introduced. I purposely hadn't told them anything.
Yeah.
Because it didn't matter to me.
Yep.
And because of that, I knew that it wouldn't matter to them. I know. So Matt and I both really like holding hands, but it was a little bit of a struggle when we first started holding hands, figuring out, okay, what's comfortable for Matt and for his hands versus what's comfortable for me.
It was finger Tetris.
And it was a little bit of Tetris, but not too much. So not really many concerns at all.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you guys want the world to know about your story, or Matt? Anything else you want to share?
Honestly, the biggest thing that helped was providence. If you just have that faith and can kind of take every day as it comes and let God worry about the big picture, with the benefit of hindsight and being able to see how God's providence works, you realize it is supposed to work its way out. And you just hope that you can remember that for whatever future struggles you have. And ultimately,
I know this as your friend, Matt, like what draws people to you is who you are. And when we think of you, your disability or the fact that you look different than most of us, like it's not even on the radar. Would you agree, Katie? That's your experience?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, most of the time I forget about it.
Right.
Me too.
I'm looking forward to being able to solve more problems together. We'll have to figure out not what Matt can and can't do, but how he can do it.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
How long do we have till you guys get married now?
What is today?
Oh, wait.
The 20th?
My phone's on the table. I have a
She
app
has
on my
Siri
phone.
tell. It's like 3.5 months, maybe 3.75 months, something about that.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
Sure thing.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you both for being so open and willing to share.
You're
your story.
welcome. Thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I love hearing your feedback. Like I've said before, this whole thing is kind of a shot in the dark for me. So super helpful to hear from you guys in terms of what you're liking, not liking, etc., etc. If you want to do that in the form of a review or follow me, like me, comment, subscribe, that stuff is all helpful to me. You can usually find me under I Choose Grit pretty much anywhere. And don't press pause yet if you want to hear an epic story of a first date fail. Thank you. Is that about the same?
I went to the escape room.
Just you and him, though, right?
Oh,
No.
you want
What?
that story? Have you not heard the story?
I don't know. What?
So what happened was I called Katie. We set up the time that we were going to meet at the escape room because she was coming from Green Bay because she was doing something else. Somehow, over the course of the days that we were talking, I had transposed in my head that the 11 o'clock time that we were meeting was the time that I had to leave. So I was an entire hour late for our first date. So I told her, I was like, she's like, should I go do this escape room? I was like, I can't tell you what to do, but all I can tell you is that I am on my way and I will be there in an hour. So she ended up going into the escape room with a group of random women that were like high school friends and that met up. Meanwhile,
remember that I didn't want it to be an actual date. So I was very happy to just go in without him because he wasn't there because I had said yes, not knowing that's what his intentions were. So I just went in. We escaped, by the way.
So meanwhile, she goes to the escape room. I call up a florist in Appleton. I was like, hi, I need a bouquet of flowers that says I'm late for a first date. She goes, what? So I get to the florist. I was like, hi, I'm here to pick up a bouquet. I called just a little while ago, and all I can hear is, oh, it's you. I'm like, crap.
And all the girls that were there, that we were all waiting for Matt, because remember, I was there just waiting, and we were all waiting to start. So by then, all of those girls, they were around my age. They knew the story. The game master knew the story. So everybody knew who he was when he showed up. Yeah. And that I didn't really want it to be a date. So they all knew all of that.
So I sat there with a bouquet of flowers in the waiting room, just waiting for them to come out. And finally hear a roommate exit. And it's like all these women's voices. I'm like, oh, that's got to be them. And all I hear is this voice say, best date ever. Katie, we have a sign for you. I'm just like, oh, they know what's going on. Aww. This really can't be good. And I just hear Katie kind of demur, and she says, I don't know if I should take this picture with that sign because it might come up again at some point. And I just remember yelling back. I was like, it's okay, you can take the picture. And then I hear one of the other women's voices, Matt, is that you? Crap, they even know my name. What is going on right now?
That's great.
For the record, I did not take the picture with that sign. I just held up a sign that said no regrets.
That's great.
So then they all filed out one by one, and like all the women, I guess, I don't remember
Aww.
it.
With the flowers.
One by one.
With the flowers.
They all.